Good morning again. I'll quickly mention a couple things. I think we have maybe all met, but I'm Jonathan Grubbs. I had the joy and privilege to serve here beginning in 1993 up and through right at the end of 1999. So my wife Mindy and I we're in the Huber Heights community and part of this church for a little over 6 years while Craig Frank was senior pastor. I was associate pastor in youth and worship, and I spent just a few Sunday afternoons in this space, in fact, because right when we left is when the church built I should point down here, the gym and the youth space. So this was our youth space when I was here, and spent some time in this very room, and it's good to be back in it with you. Mindy would love to have been able to join us. Mindy serves at Anderson University as the Director of Career and Calling, which basically means she helps students find a job after college or while students are maybe in college, kind of figure out what major or future they kind of want to do. And she is with a group of engineering students today, write their resumes, do mock interviews, and then she is also today a student. So she is completing a degree at the School of Theology, which I am excited for her doing. And this is her very last class, and she has a big test on Monday in church history. Doesn't that sound fun? So she is staying at home to account to that. We had 4 girls while we were here. So this is another reason why this place is especially important to our family, because our 4 daughters were born here. 3 of them at the same time. We have triplet girls that are 30, and then our youngest is 26, 27, and so all of them were born while we were here. And so our family multiplied. I joked with Craig when I was here. I said, yes, I am about church growth, even if I have to do it myself. So this is a special place. For this morning, we're going to spend a little time kind of focusing on 3 different things around leadership. And as we come into these, I want to share 2 things kind of as set up. And last time I was with you, I mentioned this, and I'll mention it again. My time with you this morning is not here to be some resident expert. I do not have all the answers. Those who know me well would agree with that. I am not here to kind of answer all the problems or have all the solutions. That's not my point. It's to be a fellow on this journey of leadership and in ministry, trying to navigate and work through what it means to be called by God to use our gifts for the increase of the kingdom. I'm a partner in this with you. So I hope my goal is more to give you a couple thoughts and to help you ask better questions of yourself and of one another. That's my goal. The other thing I'll quickly say is what I share today is my own. This is not something that Pastor Jerry and I have worked through. So I want to take ownership of what I say. So a couple of things maybe in our time today, I'll maybe kind of stir the pot. Don't blame Pastor Jerry, okay? There are no prompts here or anything in fact, we've not had a conversation about all the content. So if I say a few things that you're like, well, just blame me. It's not Pastor Jerry's fault at all. This is what I share emerges, again, out of my own thoughts and work where I serve as lead pastor at Park Place Church of God in Anderson, Indiana. If you've ever been over to Anderson and the university, Park Place is right there by the university campus, and I have the joy and honor now to serve there as lead pastor. And I've done that since March of 2020. And so what I share with you today, a lot of it kind of emerges even somewhat of what we're navigating and working through at Park Place, because I want you to understand that maybe some of the challenges and things that you're working with here in Huber Heights, it's like, oh, other people are dealing with that same kind of stuff. And so that's kind of my hope. So as we talk about leadership, the place that I want to begin is being a follower. That the key to being a leader in the church, has to be grounded in our followership. And here's why. Often when we talk or think about leadership, we often think in terms of our capacity, what I can do. Can I do the right thing or do this or do that? And sometimes even some people are like, oh, I'm not a leader because I can't do that. And our time today won't be so much on the idea of leadership as capacity or capability, though it entails a little bit of that. Really, I want to invite us to think about leadership as followership, which is more about our character, who we are, our being, more than our doing. Because I don't know about you, here's my absolute kind of conviction to start with, that it really doesn't matter what kind of leader you are, what you do, if who you are is completely amiss from the life and likeness of Jesus Christ. A leader can have great capacity, capabilities, but what matters most in the kingdom is who we are. So I want to start here very intentionally, because where we start is always kind of shapes where we end up. That when we think about our leadership, ours individually and ours together, all the leaders of your church, whatever shape and form, so whether that's your leadership board and teachers and just people that have influence within the life of this community, have to hold seriously our being. How are we following? Are we following Jesus? And so today our agenda is first and foremost this servant leadership and idea of spiritual formation. We'll take a little break, then get into some particulars of governance, and then some practical kind of stuff. All right, when I was with you last time, and I'll share, I have some handouts. You don't need these, but if anybody wants one, you're welcome to take one. Jerry, if you'll just kind of pass. I think I have 7 of those. I also, Jerry, I already emailed you. You have copies of these. If you want. All right, last time I was with you, both in the setting of being with the leaders, and then I spoke, and that was in June of 2024. I gave you a little image or a metaphor of thermostat and thermometer. Those are very different things. But how do they teach us kind of in terms of what does it mean to be a leader and our life as leader and more particular follower? I described it this way. A thermometer simply measures the temperature or the climate of its environment. It reflects the air around it, right? So obviously a thermometer is just going to measure, it tells us what the temperature of a building or a space or outside is. It simply it reflects what's around it, the external. A thermostat, and I think I'm looking at one in the back. I don't know if that's, yep, okay. Doesn't measure or reflect its surroundings. It influences or impacts its surroundings. So we could go in the back of the room and adjust that thermostat to make this space cooler or warmer. I want to offer to you that as we think about our own lives and being a follower in Jesus Christ, we must be thermostats and not thermometers. That our lives must not simply just reflect the environment in which we find ourselves, but that we are called to influence and impact the climate. For example, when our environment gets really hot and things get heated, we need some leaders who will help cool things down. When things have become very cold and are quite chilly, we need some leaders who raise the temperature and warm things up. Does that make sense to anybody? Anybody struggling or wrestling with the environment in which you find yourself at work and in our world? Anybody found yourself in an environment that just seems to be pretty heated lately, where things are getting hot? Or you find yourself in some environments that just are really cold, frozen. We are called to be a thermostat, not a thermometer. And so I remind you of that as we begin in this idea of following. All right, I didn't ask Pastor Jerry first. What are you preaching on tomorrow? Scripture.
I just spent 2 days driving in the car.
That's right, you do. Hopefully not Luke 16.
It is not Luke 16.
Okay,
It's talking about
woohoo.
community,
Okay,
but not that.
all right. I hope you either have a Bible or your phone has a Bible app. If it does, if you have a phone that has a Bible app, would you take your phones and turn with me to Luke 16, 19 through 28. I want to give you this story. Luke 16 is full of parables. It kind of comes towards the end here. And Jesus gives another, it is a parable, but it's not kind of in the traditional form. It's a little bit different. But I want this to kind of direct our thinking today in terms of our followership and what kind of follower am I? How is my following going? Here's the text. Read along. This is NRSV, I believe, so yours might be a little different. There was once a rich man who dressed in the most expensive clothes and lived in great luxury every day. There was also a poor man named Lazarus, covered with sores, who used to be brought to the rich man's door, hoping to eat the bits of food that fell from the rich man's table. Even the dogs would come and lick his sores. The poor man died and was carried by the angels to sit beside Abraham at the feast in heaven. The rich man died and was buried. And in Hades, where he was in great pain, he looked up and saw Abraham far away with Lazarus at his side. He called out, "Father Abraham, take pity upon me and send Lazarus to dip his finger in some water and cool my tongue, because I am in great pain in this fire." But Abraham said, "Remember, my son, that in your lifetime you were given all the good things, while Lazarus got all the bad things. But now he is enjoying himself here while you are in pain. Besides all that, there is a deep pit lying between us, so that those who want to cross over from here to where you are cannot do so, nor can anyone cross over to us from where you are." And the rich man said, excuse me, "Then I beg you, Father Abraham, send Lazarus to my father's house, where I have 5 brothers. Come, let him go and warn them, so that they, at least, will not come to this place of pain." The word of the Lord for the people of God. here's a couple things that I want to remind you about this text. First, this passage I do not believe is about the afterlife. We can hear this text, and maybe we've even heard it taught, or maybe taught it ourselves, and can maybe be prone to focus on issues of the afterlife, heaven and hell. But interestingly, there's very little about heaven and hell in this text at all. And most likely, when it's written, the ancient world did not even understand heaven and hell quite the way we do in our understanding now. The point is not on the afterlife. The point, the real emphasis, what we know from this story that Jesus is teaching, is about this life. Our lives, our living lives, not what comes after our lives. So keep that in mind. The passage also, I think, invites us, I think that's what Jesus is doing, a parable, even the word parable means to lay alongside. So Jesus is giving us a story, a narrative, to lay alongside like, okay, how is your living going? So it invites us to examine the condition, our spiritual condition, and how we specifically are living out our lives, our witness of faith. So let me ask you, you just read it, I can go back, or hopefully you still have it on your phone. What were some of the key words, phrases? What in this story strikes you? What makes you kind of go, ooh? There are many lessons here. Here's one that I want to offer you today. By the way, this is my text that I'm going to preach tomorrow, and it's not one that I chose. This text is from what we call the lectionary, which is a group of scriptures that historically the church has used on certain days. And so for tomorrow, on this day, is this story from the Gospel of Luke that I think here is the key lesson and point. The big idea. Can God have faith in us? We hear a lot, we talk a lot in church about have faith in God. Trust God, right? When is the last time we've ever turned that around? Should faith and trust go in more than one direction? You see, as leadership, I think one of the most important questions we need to ask ourselves is this: can God have faith in me? God, can you trust me? Ooh, that is a very different question, isn't it? I like the other. Let's just stay like, can we have faith and trust in God? That feels a lot easier and better to me. I would much rather preach that sermon than, God, can you have faith in Jonathan? Can you trust me? Am I trustworthy to be the kind of leader and person you want me to be? That is a very different question, and one that maybe sometimes we don't always address. But this text that is what it's completely about. Because interestingly, I think the lesson is this: it's not about one's position, it is about one's posture. The rich man had position. Some translations mention that he is dressed in fine purple robes, eating at a banquet. Huge amounts of food is kind of the picture. And here is Lazarus literally finding the scraps off the table to sustain himself in such a poor physical condition that even the dogs lick his sores. But apparently within Lazarus, the one, or God who comforts, apparently lived a life whose posture was, as we have mentioned and identified, was one of compassion and concern or engagement, to the point, even the rich man, and I think Pastor Jerry's right. They apparently kind of had some connection that even the rich man recognizes, oh, Lazarus is the kind of person I want to send to my family to see if he can give the message, make a difference. That interestingly, the rich man, was not willing to do in his own lifetime. So here's, again, where I'm going to stir the pot. Apparently, our position doesn't matter as much as our posture. I'm going to say that again, because I'm not sure if you're quite hearing me. That our position does not matter as much as our posture. Illustrate it this way. We can think in terms of our position of, well, I've been ratified or elected by the church to hold a position of leader on a board. I've been asked and designated to be a teacher of a class or a class of kids or adults, or hold a position in the church as pastor or whatever that might be. We have a certain position or recognition. Our position does not matter as much as our posture. Are we the kind of people that have compassion and care and love, attention to others, willingness to engage, use our lives in what we have for the sake of others? That is more important than any position that we hold. Maybe in terms, we think position of kind of a position, a rank, but now this is where I'm going to meddle. It can also mean any kind of position that we believe or hold in terms of beliefs or ideologies, or even political. See, I don't think it really matters what position you hold, right or left. It's what kind of posture you have. I find myself in a day and time in the context of a world and church world that is very caught up in position. What position do you hold on this issue or that issue? And all that matters is what position do you hold. And I think we need to hear Luke 16. That maybe it's not about what position we hold. What is our posture? Are we living lives of compassion and care and concern? That doesn't mean we don't hold positions on things, whether that's an ideology or that we don't hold positions in terms of an appointment or a role or something. But ultimately, if our lives and lifestyle do not reflect the character and virtue of Jesus Christ, does it really matter? Does it really matter that I have Reverend in front of my name if my posture, if my character and life doesn't reflect the life of Jesus Christ? Does it matter really what position I hold social politically if my life does not reflect the life of Jesus Christ? And ultimately, can God have faith and trust me and you to be followers, to be like Jesus? I think that's what this text is really calling us to be about. We are reminded that Christianity then is not to be understood as a system of belief, ideology, or philosophy. The essence of Christianity is a lifestyle. It is the Christ-like life and character of the individual and the community. You as a church. How do we become like a thermostat? We embody and demonstrate the character and virtue of Christ in how we live, speak, and relate to those around us. Do you know what a virtue is? That's a word that we don't always use a lot, maybe. In fact, it might be kind of, well, it's kind of an old-timey kind of word, and it is, but it's a great word. The word virtue means a trait that demonstrates excellence, but even more than that, a trait that has excellence. It is a trait that significantly impacts or influences for the positive. Virtue has agency. It's not like, Colleen has virtue because she's a nice person. She is. Virtue impacts and influences. Virtues are these. Think, what come to your mind when you think virtue? I think of generosity. I think of peace. I think of kindness or loving. Virtues are those things that, someone who's generous or has this gracious spirit. That's a person of virtue, but it's more than just, that's nice. It's kind of like, it's different when you're around them. You're blessed. You're encouraged, right? I mean, do you get where I'm going with this? Someone who has virtue changes the environment around them. That's virtue. But not just change it, it changes it for the positive. It's the excellent thing. So what I'm saying is that I think this text is calling for us to have the character and virtue of Jesus. That's what we see in Lazarus. That is what the rich man comes to recognize. Whoa. My life, I had position, but I had apparently had very little influence, right? What's happening to his family? Not good. Apparently he had no positive influence and impact on even the people closest to him. And now the story really, again, not so much about the afterlife, it's the accountability of this life, recognizing that our lives are meant to impact and influence the people around us for the best. Are we fostering the flourishing of others around us in the likeness of Jesus Christ so that the kingdom grows and that people experience God? This rich man comes to realize, I've missed it. My life, all that stuff didn't matter. Now the people, the legacy, those around me are now going to live with the consequences because of the lack of character and virtue in my own life. Can we say that any clearer? Because of the lack of character and virtue in his own life, the rich man made a negative impact, the consequences of people around him. So I'm just simply here today to ask you the question, not only do we have faith in God, but can God have faith in us? Are we people of character and virtue? For us as Christ followers, I think those virtues are maybe best seen in Galatians 5 in the fruit of the Spirit, right? We often refer to as fruit, and there's 9 of them there, and it's all one thing, but, peace, patience, kindness, good, all those, what wonderful virtues. And those, to me, are the virtues like, there's our leadership. Doesn't mean I'm the smartest. Doesn't mean I'm the most strategic. It doesn't mean I can do all these things. You hear me? Do all of these things. It means who I am. Loving, patient, kind, self-controlled. Can God have faith in me to be that kind of leader? Because I am first and foremost a follower of Jesus Christ. What then is the result of leadership disconnected from the character and virtues of Jesus? Folks, it's dangerous and harmful when we as leaders somehow are disconnected from the character and virtue of Christ. Notice on these I've said that we're people of the way. The word Christian was not a word or a label that the first followers of Jesus described themselves. You maybe know that from the book of Acts, right? That they were first called Christians. That's in Acts. That was even maybe a a slur or a little bit of a again, stirring the pot. I want to tell you, in our day and climate, I'm using the term Christian less and less and trying to intentionally self-describe myself as a Christ follower. Talk about the church as we who follow Jesus, or the way. That's the earliest term. By the way, the earliest Christians called themselves people of the way. There was a way about them. I say that just again because I think in our climate today, the word or label Christian has become more about a system of belief, or it's an ideology or a philosophical construct. And we have completely lost sight of what it is at its most foundational and most important level is a lifestyle, character, virtue. And so I'm going to invite you to do this. Often at church meetings and leadership meetings, we talk a lot about goals. In the next few minutes, I want to invite you to write some goals, or maybe just one goal. But I want you to write it for yourself, about yourself, in terms of your spiritual life. When's the last time, and maybe some of you have, great, but when's the last time you have intentionally written down a spiritual goal? God, I want to grow in this way. I want to invite you to consider not just grow in general, but specifically, God, I want to grow in terms of my character, my life, and living in this way. So I want you to think about this. Spiritual goal setting entails identifying a spiritual need or issue you want to address in your life. Examples could include overcoming fear, anger, resentment, the need for forgiveness, a lack of joy, contentment, a greater prayer life, or spending time in God's Word. Having a spiritual goal is about being intentional and committed to addressing a spiritual need or issue in your life and allowing God's grace and Spirit to work in you. So, would you identify one specific goal, just one thing, and be accountable, maybe even by sharing that goal with someone that you know and trust that could help support or encourage you to pray? So on a piece of paper, whether it's your notes here or just something else, I want to invite you to a few minutes of thinking about what is one goal in terms of your leadership as a follower that maybe you want to work on. Fear, anger, peace. So, what is that? And make that a spiritual goal. So, do this for the next few minutes. Would you reread the text? Side note, you've heard probably many times, or reminded others even your own teaching. Reading Scripture sometimes needs to be done twice. Once for the head, and once for the what? Heart. Do that. So reread the text from Luke, maybe all the way through 31 if you want. Then take a few minutes and identify one clear spiritual goal for this fall. One goal for this fall. With the idea of where can God have greater faith and trust in you as a leader and follower of Christ. Take a few minutes. Read. Just reflect. And maybe jot a few notes. I'll collect us back in a few minutes. So I hope whatever you wrote is not a complete thing. That this is just like a seed. I hope that you've thought of a few things, prompted by a couple things, maybe written a couple things. Come back to those. And may they begin to prompt you and lead you closer to the likeness of Jesus and your followership, because that's what your true leadership is about. Last thought. One of my very favorite theologians, ethicist for years at Duke University, Dr. Stanley Hauerwas. And he would say, "Don't tell me what you believe. show me what you practice. Leadership is based on followership. May God have faith in us and in this church. May God trust us, this church, to be people who are like Jesus in loving those around us. All right? Yes, a quiz, because this is exactly what you want to do on a Saturday morning. Right? All right. Here you go. There are 8 of you for Huber Heights Church of God. I want you to work together and talk about creating a rank of these ministry attributes. Can you see those? Corporate worship style, building maintenance and upkeep, mission and vision, church budgeting and financial matters, maintaining church heritage and tradition, church organization and leadership, programs and services. No pressure, but I am timing you. Literally. Go. Yeah. I would, and by the way, this is my list, very non-scientific. I created it with the wording originally intentional. So thank you for picking up even things like corporate worship. I particularly didn't want to just say general worship, but I wanted to kind of push on style a little bit. My argument or thought is that I think any local church probably to some varying degree needs all of these. There's none, I think, that we could just say is not evident. To some degree, it's going to show up or need to be done, or it's going to exist. The issue is where we place these, or more specifically, where we put our energies and effort. So I created this list because last spring at Park Place Church, we engaged in a church campaign. We're doing a renovation on our church steeple and other places in the building. And we're just about to complete an $825,000 building renovation. And I pulled our church together in clusters, in small groups of no more than 20 people for 2 months. So we had, I think I had 11 of these small group gatherings. And the first thing I did was ask them in each of all those clusters to rank this. Because as we were coming into this project, I was curious, what did the church think was most important in the life of the church? So here's our results, and you might not be able to quite see that in the back, but they said, by their numbers, mission and vision, programs and services, church organization and leadership, church budgeting and finances, corporate worship style, budgeting, maintenance and upkeep, and maintaining heritage and tradition. So from last February and March at Park Place Church, that was our list from across the whole church. I mean, everyone was invited to that to try to kind of get a measure. Make sense? And you can kind of see how it measures up to yours. Do you see any similarities there? Now, here's the thing. I didn't care what the score was or how the list came out, and I didn't care about yours. The whole point is I don't care where you rank it. Here's what was really curious to me, is how long it took for the group to reach number 1. What was your first one? First attribute, your ranking on what was most important. What was yours? Mission, vision. Park Place 2. How long did it take you, think about this, how long did it take you as a group to reach the conclusion that mission and vision, in your perspective, and that could change, but just right now, how long did it take you to reach the conclusion that, generally speaking, mission and vision is our number 1? How long did it take? Listen to that. How long did it take? Seconds, maybe. See the number here? you deliberated approximately 8 minutes and 15 seconds, which is pretty much spot on. I gave about 10 minutes to Park Place folks. Same thing, 11 clusters ish, approximately 15, 20 people, and almost all of those clusters reached, we had unanimous, everyone said mission and vision. It took those groups very little time to say that. And the rest of the time, significant time, was all spent in this. Think about this. Could it be in the life of the church, we very quickly kind of even rush and almost kind of move past mission and vision, and that the vast majority of our time and energies is spent right here? Think about that.
As soon as we said mission and vision,
You just,
my next thought was, but that's not what we spend our most energy on.
yep. You see, that to me is very telling. We know mission vision is number one, or that's what it needs to be aspirationally. But in reality, we spend a whole lot of time and energy trying to work through these. For us at Park Place, particularly because of when this was done, the budget, a lot of our groups got caught on the budgeting and finance because they're entering this major campaign. And then they're like, no, we can't, just because we're doing this campaign, can't make that. And so they are, and it was just fun to just be like a fly on the wall and just kind of sit back and watch these groups. We know mission and vision is where we need to put our energies, our time. But we get, and these are important things, right? That's my point. All of these matter. But this almost kind of gets lost. We almost take it so for granted. It's just so obvious. Then we get caught up in this. The other thing is this is so important. And by the way, this should direct all of these. And these will fluctuate. That's the other thing with Park Place. I mean, this is not a fixed list. Do this a year from now, in the life of your church, things will change. For us at Park Place, our building and finances right now are higher in some ways because we're in the midst of a major campaign. Well, that's going to be different than it is a year from. I mean, that you see where I'm going, but I want you to understand or kind of take hold. Wow, we just in seconds, your words, in seconds we saw mission and vision. Let's say 15 seconds, and then spent another 8 minutes talking about the rest. So here's where governance comes in. Here's our nuts and bolts of our time together. Some of this will be a bit repetitive if you were here with me last time in June of 24, but that's okay because we need refresher on this. So what is governance, or why does governance matter, and what is governance about? It's not just about mission and vision, it is. But it's putting our energies and time here so that it shapes these other things. I'm going to draw on the board a little bit more here. Let's talk about this, what governance is as a organization and leadership model in perspective to others, and to kind of know why this whole governance thing is important. Do we have some governance board members here? A couple? Okay. So those who are on this, hopefully kind of refresher. Those who are not on the governance board, I hope it kind of sheds, this is what they're doing or should be about, and all of that. First, I want to talk about there are different ways for churches to be organized or to structure themselves. Earliest kind of way probably was the elder model. The elder model, as you see here, is kind of centralized around a leader, position, person, and credentials. The elder is also kind of trustees. And so that group is organized kind of around people. Please hear that word. It's kind of centralized around people. A different way of functioning for some churches is a church council model. And it's centralized around representation, our voice. And those two, for a lot of years in churches, were the two primary kinds. And let me kind of demonstrate that this way. So the elder model, here is my really bad artwork. That's a table, as if you can tell. Oops. And these are chairs sitting around the table. Yes, I didn't do well in art class. And what I want you to visualize that the kind of governance, the direction, leadership, all of that from the elder model kind of starts with the people sitting around this table. Starts with them, who they are, and kind of flows out, because the focus on this model is really the people. And there's some good attributes to that, because it's people who are recognized in the church community for their spiritual gifts and maybe their leadership. But the downside is really what emerges out of the table in their conversations really is based on the people, their preferences and who they are and what they see fit. Okay? Does that make sense? So it's the people, right? Now take a table in the church council model. Yes, there are people involved, but now those people are there by virtue of their representing. They're there by virtue of their women's ministries, youth ministries, and they are there in a church council model to represent and to give voice about their respective areas. So what happens at this table is more about, like in the elder model, it kind of starts with the people and kind of moves out. With the council model, it's the people that kind of come in. Does that make sense? Anybody ever been a part of an elder model? Trustees? Yeah? Anybody ever been a part of a church council model? Okay. Let me tell you, then there are some churches, because Jerry and I were part of a church at Eaton that actually had both. So when I first went to Eaton, Ohio, they had a church council and they had a trustee board. And the church council dealt with ministry. And so people came in and they gave reports on the various ministries. And then they had a trustee board that dealt with all the finances and the money. Now here's what I want you to think about. How effective do you think it might be about a group of people they're representing, kind of hearing reports, talking about ministry, but have no authority or true ability to determine budgeting, money, and financial decisions? How effective is it to have like trustees who are making decisions on budget and finance, but are not connected to ministry? See, here the downfall of both a bit, and no system or model is perfect, but the elder model often is so determined or shaped by the people, their preferences, their desires, and that can become problematic, which is why, by the way, churches started going to the council model. That came historically later, church council. And church council does a good job on hearing from various ministries, but you kind of sit around the table and kind of hear reports, and when the meeting's done, you say, thank you, bye. For example, I am now lead pastor at Park Place Church, which is my home church. I have the unique opportunity to be a lead pastor of a church that I grew up in and was a kid in. And so when I was at high school, I was I was the youth representative, my 11th and 12th grade years, listen to this, for a church council that consisted of 24 people at Park Place Church of God. 24 people on the church council that met monthly and heard from reports from 24, or at least some of those that they would come in and you'd hear a report and everyone would say, good meeting, good night. Now let me ask you this. In both of those models, the church council does a great job on representing and giving voice. The elder model does a great job on identifying leaders and people. But what's missing in both? Well, it could be, because all can maybe miss that. But in neither of those models is mission and vision the driving force, the center of what this table is all about. In a church council model, everyone sitting in chairs is there to represent, to give a report. Here's what's happening in youth and in worship and in women's ministries and in men's ministries. And I'm going to keep going. So I just give my report, which normally is things are good or we need money. So it's good on reporting, but what gets lost? Mission, vision. Elder or trustee, the people sitting around the table are there because of maybe their leadership and attributes, but it's more about those people than it is centered around mission and vision. Going back to Eaton, not to pick on them, but just because it's experience for Jerry and I before we went to the governance model. Jerry, I remember early on in my ministry in Eaton, sitting around the trustee meeting, and by the way, like a lot of churches, the trustees were all men. I'm just being honest, poking the bear. It was a bunch of men. And I remember sitting there, and they were deciding the budget for Vacation Bible School. And I raised my hand and said, how many of you have been involved in Vacation Bible School? Have any of you even volunteered? Not a one. And I said, is this group maybe best empowered to even decide or discern how much money vacation? Well, I don't know, but we're supposed to make the budget. And I was like, this is not good. Well, that could happen in a church council representative, but then, hey, I do VBS, and this is what I think. We need $25,000 to do VBS. Okay, but does that really reflect the mission and vision of the church? You see where I'm going? So I'm trying to give some comparison and contrast to help you see that within the elder model and council model, there's some good things, voice and representation, and sometimes the people in leadership, but both lack what governance tries to intentionally work at doing. That really at this table, what the table is about is mission and vision. And that's why the people sitting in the chairs have been called to do. They're not there to give reports, though they might give some. They're not there just to be the leaders and the elders of the church, though we hope they are. They are there because mission and vision. Question, or does that make sense a little bit? I hope you see that, because this governance thing is different. And here's where it's different. Board members are not there to represent personal agendas, personal groups, or ministry departments. The owner of the congregation is the Lord of the church. God alone chooses the beneficiaries. First the lost sheep, then the gathered flock. The board represents Jesus and his mission to the people in the world who he died to redeem. John Kaiser, Winning on Purpose. Governance is about decision making. That's why we have governing boards. They are decision makers. But their decision making has to be centered in the mission vision. The goal of church governance is to ensure that a local congregation accomplishes its mission and fulfills its vision with an appropriate amount of structure and accountability. Kaiser reminds us that dysfunctional governance can create an inward focus, a resistance to change, complacency, and diffuse accountability. So the question then is our decision-making centered and centralized around our mission and vision? Is that where our emphasis and our energy, is that where we're spending our time? So I want to stop and have you think, particularly those who are on the governing board, or even for yourself, as you hear, take an assessment of your last 2 meetings. Here's where I don't want, in fact, yesterday I had lunch with the chair of our governing board, and we were talking about this. Like, oh, for our last couple of meetings, how much time have we really spent on mission and vision? So think about your agenda for those of you on the governing board. How did mission and vision even show up in your agenda? Think about your last couple of meetings. How long did they go? How long does one of your governing board meetings typically go? Hour and a half? Okay. In that hour and a half, how much time is devoted to mission and vision? Either mission and vision directly, or how are these ministries helping us accomplish mission and vision? Because sometimes our governing board meetings end up like our quiz. We kind of take the mission and vision for granted, and then we spend all our time and all kinds of other stuff. It's important stuff. It's needed stuff. But it's not governance stuff. Here's one of the things that I had conversation with one of the leaders from our church who's not on our governing board, just a part of our church. We have 2 annual business meetings. I don't know how you guys are structured, but we have for us, our budget meetings are in June. We have a fiscal calendar rather than a yearly calendar. So our budget goes from July 1 through June, end of June, right? So in early June, we do our business and financial stuff and have our formal, approval of the budget and all of that. And then in November, we do what we call our leadership meeting, which is ratifying leaders for the next year, and it's our leadership. So we're a month or so out from that leadership meeting. And I had one of my leaders just ask me, because he's newer to the church, say, are your business meetings always so much about kind of church business stuff? I don't hear a lot about mission and vision. I went, ooh, got some work to do. You're right. Because we need to talk about budgets and all that. But how much, I started thinking, I went back and looked at our last couple of annual meetings. How much time have we really spent on mission and vision? And I was like, oh, I don't like that answer too much. That's not good. So let's remind ourselves, what are some key principles? What is this governance thing all about? Here are a few from John and Miriam Carver, because what this is all based on is their writings. Again, trying to be intentional about mission and vision. They remind us that the trust in trusteeship is to the mission and vision. That's what a trustee is. They're not just position, it's the entrusted with that mission and vision. Leadership and governance then are focused on the mission and the big picture. Leaders, be focused on the big picture of the church. Secondly, the board speaks with one voice or not at all. Leadership and governance are focused on speaking with one unified voice. Board decisions are focused on the ends. Policy decisions, governance processes, leadership and governance are focused on establishing and articulating the ends. That means kind of where we're going, or the outcomes of what the church should be accomplishing. And I'll get into more specific about the ends have to do with the way you're impacting the community around you. How is the church impacting its community for the better? A board should define, delegate, and rather than react and ratify. Governance supports and resources the means by which the staff lead. So, governing boards develop the ends. Your staff and volunteers are the means. Release them to do that. The board actively supports and defends the freedom and authority of the pastoral staff to lead, manage the ministries of the operations of the church. And the governance group is about establishing and providing stewardship of the budget, both income and expenses. Governing board. Do not turn over to your pastoral staff the responsibility of fundraising, the income side. Because often governing boards can just deal with, okay, our expenses are in line, we're good. No, it's the governing board's responsibility to be the main voice of saying, church, we need resources, or deal with the income and the expense side. Big picture. So notice the bold words. In leadership, it's this big picture, one voice, focusing on the ends, releasing the means, supporting and defending, and then being good stewards. Questions, thoughts, anything about that? So then a governing board's success is defined and determined by mission. How do we know we had a good board meeting? We got out of here in an hour and 10 minutes. Park Place, someone brought food. Yeah, those are both good things. Short meetings and having food are great. But how do we know we had a good board meeting? Because we addressed mission and vision. John and Miriam Carver remind us that the justification for any organizational body lies in what difference it can make. A nonprofit organization exists so that the world can be a better place. John and Miriam Carver, their writing is not necessarily for the church, by the way. They're writing for nonprofits and just organizations wherever. But boy, this to me speaks to the church. What kind of difference are we making? Are we existing so that the community and the world around us is a better place? The board defines which human needs are to be met, for whom, and at what cost. And then written with long-term perspective, these mission-related statements embody the board's vision, and the organization's reason for being. The governing board clarifies that, and then it's the task of the staff and other leaders to put that into practice. Ends are always about the changes for persons to be made, not just to describe the organization itself. Here's one of the things that for us we're trying to grow with, that our ends, better than just goals. Often church goals are, how can we increase our numbers? How can we be better in budget, right? But how often are our church goals really about us and impact the community around us? Very little. How do we begin to work at our goals, our ends as a church, and even the board, not just about the church. In fact, maybe even very little about the church, but it's demonstrated that, how are we impacting around us? So for us at Park Place, one of the main ministries for us is our food pantry. So one of our key ends or goals, how do we begin to come alongside people who are dealing with food insecurity, to provide resources for them so that food is one less worry in their life and that they experience the love of Jesus Christ. Part of a campaign, I'll just brag about our church because it's not about me. Park Place has been doing this for decades. We did a little research and found out that in a 1 year and 12 months, we did a community assessment, and that Park Place reaches approximately 30,000 people in a 12-month period. 20,000 of those persons come through our food pantry. We're the largest food pantry in Madison County. So we feed approximately 20,000, just a little over 20,000 people a year. So we've identified here is a way we help other people flourish. And so our goals, our ends are not just about us within the building, but how are we very intentional about people who may never come in the building, but go through our pantry or other resources and ways. For us, sitting on the campus of Anderson University, we've decided, we've changed our goals and our ends, is not to try to get students into Park Place. It's try to get Park Place onto the campus. Students may never, in fact, probably won't, because of some things. Students may never choose Park Place Church to be their home church. And for us, that's okay. But how do we let those students know we're here to support you, we care about you, and we want to see you flourish in your education and in your life? That's because of governance. That's not us. That's Carver model that says, how are we creating goals and ends for the benefit of others outside of us? That makes sense? That's what governance does. So that's more than, not trying to pick, but let's be honest, just a church council that's here to be reports, or an elder model that just kind of starts with us and makes it about us. But Carver pushes us really to say, hold it. All of our goals and ends have to be created for those who are not part of us. That's mission and vision. All right, a couple other things. Nope, I'm going backwards. Helps if you go forwards. So the board is accountable for organizational success and not organizational details. Governing board, spend more time on mission vision, and are we accomplishing that, than the details of the day-to-day operations. Release that to your staff and ministry teams and people to do. Be focused on your mission and vision. The justification for any organization lies in the difference that it can make, and that's what I've been talking about. A nonprofit exists so that the world can be a better place. The board defines which human needs are met, and that becomes the reason for being. Ends, these goals are about change. Before we break, maybe for those of you that are on the board or others just within the life of the church, what does this say to you? How does this governance model, where do you see it at work? What kind of benefits do you maybe find in it? I'd love to hear from you kind of in this governance model. Remember, why does it matter? What is it about? Thoughts and observations? In closing, I want to mention this. So whether you're on the board or just here today, and as you interact, I hope you begin to see that the governance model is not the same as council, an elder, or a trustee model. And it's not that it's better in the sense that all models have their weaknesses and strengths. That is absolutely true. But they are different animals. The governance is not just, well, we're doing this, but it's the same thing. It's just called something different. That can happen in the church. We can kind of do the same thing and just label it or call it something else. No, governance model is very different. It's a different animal. And so know that. And it's a work in progress. It's a hard work. And every church kind of has to work through these things and make them their own, but it's different. It really is a different approach. But I think if we commit to it, it really will become a better pathway forward, because that's what this section is, leading forward in mission. It gives us a better pathway of spending more energy and effort, going back to our little quiz on mission and vision, and not just getting caught up in the swirl of all the other stuff, which is important, but at the expense, so that we don't spend 15 seconds on mission vision and 8 minutes on the other stuff. All right, we're in the home stretch, and I'm going to wrap up here in a bit. I want to say again, thank you. This is as I've said, an important and significant place for me, and it's just an honor that you'd come and let me share a few thoughts in some minutes with you. With that, I especially want to say thank you, because you're either here on a Saturday morning or maybe watching at some point, and there's other things you could be doing. And you're here. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for your contribution to the life of this church and this community. That is no small thing. Thanks. Here's my last thought. So our time together has been leadership emerges out of followership. The nuts and bolts of leading forward comes in our focusing on mission vision. And then just kind of one last practical thought that I want to leave with you is how we lead is out of our strengths. And so I want to share just a few minutes with you about strength-based leadership. I will begin here. It is with the idea of soundtracks. I think I mentioned in my sermon when I was with you last June, and of course I'm sure you remember everything I said. Not at all, because I don't either. But I think I mentioned to you in a little analogy that comes from an author, John Acuff, called soundtracks. And it goes like this. So if you've heard it before, bear with me. I'll remind you. Soundtracks has to do with the thoughts and kind of the background sound and noise that we often operate in our life and how that impacts and influences us. Let me illustrate it for you this way. I'm sure at some point, maybe probably many in this room, love to watch movies. So picture an opening scene of a movie. It is a young girl, child. She is in a swing in front of an old house, in front of an old oak tree. There is sunshine and there's a light breeze. And this child is swinging back and forth on this swing. You got the imagery? Kind of an old house, little child swinging back and forth. Now, envision that image and put a soundtrack to it. Music. Put music particularly that's kind of light and cheerful. Can you see this child with this music? And what kind of thoughts come into our mind? Childlike. I remember a swing like that from my own childhood. Some pleasant thoughts, just, oh, what a beautiful image. Stop and do this. Same child, same house, same tree, same sunshine, same light breeze. But put eerie, kind of darker music to that. Picture that. This child is swinging, and there's this darker, kind of creepy music. What then comes into our minds? Not, childhood memories, but run! Yes. We see this really well, by the way. Think about a summer vacation. Someone swimming in the ocean. Put nice music to it, and you're like, oh man, I wish I was on the beach. Put dun-dun, 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 dun, right? Soundtrack makes all the difference. I was sharing with Dwight, maybe others, our daughter Gabrielle is in LA, finished a program, master's in music for media. And that's what, so she literally does soundtracks now for commercials and movies. I mean, all of that. She writes, and writes music for sound. And that music changes, you with me? Music completely changed the tenor of what we see visually. Those soundtracks, the kind of what's going on in the background, completely shapes how we perceive what is in front of us. As I close, very practically, I want to give you this idea that I think right now within the life of churches that I see, my own church that I'm at Park Place and broader across the church world, is that we have a lot of soundtracks going on within our people. And they are the soundtracks of fear and scarcity, uncertainty and anxiety, and that those soundtracks greatly impact how we do ministry. And that is not just true for the life of the church and the world around us. That affects us as leaders. And so I want to take just a few minutes. Here's my main thing, is how can we lead more so out of strengths-based, specifically more so out of the abundance of God. How can we lead more so out of the abundance of God and not so maybe fixated on the fear and scarcity that can be around us? So, take a few minutes. Share with me. What are the strengths about Huber Heights Church of God right now? Not a decade ago, but I mean right now, today. What are some good things, some strengths about this congregation? Say it louder. A caring attitude.
Strength is our pastoral staff and our other staff, our leaders, our ministry directors.
Okay? Great. Your people and staff and volunteers. Caring attitude. The involvement of people. What else?
There's a real hunger for the Word. We have throughout the youth group and, the adults at church. I see a real hunger to, learn who God is, how
Yeah.
God wants to live
Yeah.
with us.
Yeah. That's awesome. Just a genuine hunger and desire to learn and grow. Are we in touch with those things? I'm going to speak for myself. I can often find myself easy for me to come in and sit in my office and think of all the negative things or the things that we don't have at Park Place Church of God. I can easily draw to mind the obstacles and the struggles. I lose sight of all that we have. Why? Because of the soundtracks that are going on. The way I see things can often, I move into that scarcity mindset. And that impacts leadership. So how about your governing board or leadership? What are the strengths of the governing board right now? Then, how about yourself? What are your strengths? Whether you're on the governing board or just serving within the life of the church or just a servant, what are your strengths? I want to remind you, Jerry, this is a reminder for us since we dealt with this at Eaton specifically. Maybe you use this here. The idea of a leadership wheel, that all of us are somewhere on this wheel. Now, I want you to see, and if you can, from your notes or this, that generally speaking, there are kind of these quadrants or areas that often we as individuals tend to fall into because of our temperament and personality, our skill set, even our spiritual gifting. There are some people that are just leaders. Like what we use in leadership analysis called the DISC sometimes, and if you've ever done that, that's the high. That's just people who just are good leaders. They kind of get people together. They kind of get them going, right? They just provide that. On the other hand, there are some people that are these community people. These are high relational people. They're often people that are not up front. In fact, just the opposite. They're kind of behind the scenes. But they just care. They're encouragers. The Barnabas, they just come alongside and thank you and encourage and just kind of love on people. There are some people that are visionary. These are our dreamers. These are the people, let's go, and they've got an idea, and they're often creative, and they have that vision and direction. And then across from them are people who are the management. These are the organized people. They see details and understand the things that need to be done. In order to do that, they tend to be very strategic. The point is, we need all of these people. I I don't know if your governance board has done anything on strengths assessment on the team. I want to just plant a seed. At Park Place, and this was not me, our chairperson, Joe Cookston, we just did Strengths Finder. If anybody's familiar with Strengths Finder, Strengths Quest. So our whole team did that, and we spent a few minutes in each meeting talking about what does everyone on our board contribute? What are your strengths? So here's the point with strengths-based, is that if we are really going to flourish individually and as a community, it will be out of our strengths, not fixing our weaknesses. One more time. That we flourish not in fixing or remediating our weaknesses, it is leveraging our strengths. Look at it this way. If this is kind of the median, the halfway line, this is our weakness. These are our strengths. If we put all of our energies in trying to fix and fill up our weaknesses, guess where we end up? Right at the halfway, we end up mediocre. If we put energies and our attention on strengths, that is how we begin to raise the bar, so to speak. Yes, there are certainly things with our challenges and weaknesses that we maybe need to address. But I'm asking you to consider focusing more energy on your strengths, what you do well. And it is by leveraging those strengths individually and as a community, you really begin to move past the median line rather than trying to fix all the problems. But that's not often our orientation. We can spend a lot of time just trying to fix all the weaknesses, and we just end up, okay. Rather than leveraging our strengths, which is like, value what each person brings. So when Jerry and I were at Eaton, we spent some time on this leadership wheel, and we're talking about any good, healthy team needs to have all these folks. So it's a wheel and not a flat tire. Because if you are a congregation, even a governing board, that has a bunch of management and leaders and even visionary and has no community, what's missing? What's missing? What does that team look like? What does that team feel like? All business, no relationships. Or just the opposite. If it's all relational and you're managing, maybe have some leaders but no vision, what's happening? Nothing. Right?
You're not going forward.
You're not going forward. We see this, right? But here's the thing. When we start embracing this, this is going to take us beginning to value each other. Because these are opposites, folks. These relational community people, at times, they're in most tension with the leadership types. And these visionaries are in tension and frustration with the management, or vice versa, the management with these dreams. It's like, whoa, they are so, exactly, so they complement that, they're so different. But how do we intentionally become a church, particularly around our leadership, that says, man, we value diversity. And without that diversity and that difference, we don't roll very well. Things aren't rolling so smoothly without being strengths-based. But that's not always easy. So I invite you to consider for yourself, do a little investigating. So whether it's StrengthsFinder, Myers-Briggs, the DISC inventory, there is so many resources, and I know your pastor is aware of many of those. I invite you to consider doing some of that as board development and leadership development. Do you know your strengths? How are you contributing those to the life of the community? Because here's the thing. Doing that equips you to work out of God's abundance and to address some of the soundtracks that are not healthy. Here are some soundtracks that undermine our leadership. And I've maybe shared this when I've preached as well, but I'll remind you. I think there are three main soundtracks in all of us that undermine our leadership and our person, and it is this: fear. I don't have enough. Often, persons that are dealing with great fears, there's a soundtrack going on in the back of their mind that shapes their perception. So no matter what they look at something, it's like, I don't have enough. I don't have enough. I can't do that. I don't have enough. For some, it's shame. I've not done enough. That sense of regret and shame within their own life, it is a soundtrack that plays over and over like a broken record. I didn't do that well. I should have done more. That sense of regret, shame. I've not done enough. And for some, they're dealing, I'm messing up, that's guilt, and then shame. Sorry. Shame is, I'm not enough. And it is a soundtrack, often from wounding and trauma that they've experienced in their life and their life journey. And it is like a soundtrack playing in the background. I'm not enough. I'm not enough. I want to tell you that we as people, all of us, have this fear, guilt, shame. And in different cycles, these soundtracks that as we're trying to deal as we look at a situation. And it's not just individually. Sometimes it's collectively. Churches. Oh, we can't do that. We don't have enough. We don't have enough money. We don't have enough leaders. We don't, right? Or, no, we can't do that. We've not, whatever. Or we're, just as well, what can we do? Not just individuals, churches, church culture can have these soundtracks playing in the background that undermine our leadership and mission. And so I want to ask you today as we wrap up, do we have a clear theology formed in God's abundant grace and provision? Or are we trying to get by our human effort and ingenuity? Strength-based leadership is grounded in the abundance of God and the indwelling of the Spirit. Abundance of God and indwelling of the Spirit. We can see this wonderfully in Ephesians chapter 1. You might know, you've maybe been a Sunday school teacher and taught on this, but Ephesians chapter 1, specifically verses 3 through 14, Apostle Paul, most likely writing from prison in Rome, writes to the church at Ephesus, beginning with these words in verse 3, "Blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, who has blessed us in Christ with every spiritual blessing." Do you see a common word there? Do you see a common word there? What is it? Blessing. Some translations have praise. Paul will start, after his very short greeting, in the first two, what we call verses. Remember, originally they didn't have verses. Paul will then write to the church at Ephesus from Ephesians 1:3 through 14, and it is one sentence. Get that. 11 verses long, and it is one complete sentence in the Greek. That the period comes at the end of verse 14. In the English, they break it all up, and because we have to be correct in our English and all of that. That is not in the Greek. Literally, Paul gets caught up and cannot stop because of the abundance of God. Blessing, blessing. 7 words: blessed, bestowed, lavished upon us. He has given us this glorious inheritance. And all these verses, you read them. Why? Because Paul understood strength-based leadership. God's abundance. And he would not let a scarcity mindset control him. He's under house arrest. Most likely he is literally chained either to another guard, but we know for sure he cannot come and go as he would like. He is imprisoned. All his freedoms have been taken. This is not the condition of, I feel blessed. But somehow he is. Somehow he will not be overtaken by a scarcity mindset. Fear, guilt, and shame will not consume him. Something else will. And here's what I really love. That moment, that time had to be probably for Paul one of the worst times of his life. But I am sure thankful for it, and I know you are too, because we have Ephesians and Philippians and Colossians and Philemon specifically because God said, you need to be imprisoned. See, here's my vision of Paul. He's this go-getter. He wants to go and he wants to do. And God says, nope. You're going to sit and you're most likely going to dictate, as someone writes, at least what we have 4 letters or books of the Bible. And he is literally caught up in the abundance of God and the indwelling Spirit. Are we? I'm not. So many times in my life I get caught up in the scarcity and the fear. I don't have enough. I've not done enough. I'm not enough. And I have these soundtracks, and that affects how I lead. So what breaks? What breaks into those kind of soundtracks? And so here's my closing thought. Ooh, that's not it. There it is. Is just gratitude. If I read the bottom, it'll help. Understanding that gratitude is not just an expression of appreciation. Hey, gee, thanks. Gratitude is not just, that was nice. Gratitude is not even some mental tool to remind ourselves of all the good stuff. Count your many blessings and name them one by one. No, there's something more going on here. What's going on is that gratitude is not an idea or thought we have, but the reality of God at work within us. That gratitude and thanksgiving has agency. It is literally a soundtrack that plays in our mind, that shapes how we see things. How I see this circumstance is not the music that plays in my mind of scarcity and fear and anxiety. It is gratitude and thanksgiving. See, I can look at the church for me at 601 College Drive in Anderson, Indiana, and at times, I don't know, fear, and I've got to stop and say, Lord, what do I need to be thankful for? What are the good things that are happening? Because I lead very, very differently out of gratitude. Blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, who has blessed us in Christ with every spiritual blessing. You have everything you need to accomplish the mission and vision that God has before you. You have everything you need. That's all I've got. Leadership is followership. Lead forward through mission and vision. And focus on being strengths-based out of God's abundance and provision. And may that be some helpful seeds for the church.